stress and number of persons on board, over.
The Bermuda Triangle. Over 1 million square miles of the most mysterious, the most feared, and arguably the most dangerous stretch of ocean on the planet.
The breath left my lungs, and the thought in my mind was, how can I live without my brother?
Some have lived to tell the tale, but many more have never returned.
When I heard he wasn't on board after they had found the boat, I couldn't believe it.
Stories that defy explanation.
I wasn't sure if I was right side up or upside down. I felt like I just totally lost control of the airplane.
The thought had occurred to me this could be something other than man-made.
As they're coming over, we see that there are actually two light-colored, almost white-colored cylinders, rockets essentially, flying side by side.
And a dive to the ocean floor to solve the greatest Bermuda Triangle mystery of all time, the disappearance of Flight 19. The Bermuda Triangle is said to stretch from Miami across to Bermuda and down to Puerto Rico. But exactly why hundreds of people have vanished out there is still a mystery.
Look, I'll give you mechanical failure. I'll give you strange anomalous weather. I'll give you human error, okay? 99% of that, I'll give you that. Science, okay? But give me that 1%. And then tell me what that 1% is. And if you can't, then it's a mystery, and I want to find out what it is.
Through my experience over the years, there's rational physical explanations for almost everything that's been occurring. There's nothing supernatural going on here.
The Bermuda Triangle is a very large area. There's a lot of ship and air traffic that goes through there, and it's also an area that's very prone to hurricanes. As far as the things that occur in this area, I think most of it, or probably all of it, can be explained by weather phenomena.
Thunderstorm in vicinity.
Well, the weather can change in a matter of 30 minutes. You could be out there, and if you're off the coast and you needed to come to shelter, 30 minutes is a long time.
This is Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis.
Tonight we talk about the Bermuda Triangle. You may have heard of it as the Devil's Triangle or Satan's Triangle. It's a very, very strange...
Late-night radio host Clyde Lewis has spent years reporting on the bizarre disappearances and events in the Bermuda Triangle.
You know, when I was a kid, I used to watch...
He's convinced that there's a huge supernatural force at work out there.
We know that phosphorescent gases come up out of the ocean. We know that all these things happen, but what we don't take into account is that the planet is electromagnetically driven. There are places where you can actually feel the power in them. Areas of this planet where if magnetics come together at just the right frequency and at just the right space and time, something opens up. And if you just happen to be there, you can go through and maybe you won't be able to come back out.
No, if anything's going to happen... Oh, it's going to happen out here. That's right.
One of the most mysterious events happened to Paul Vance when he set off from Palm Beach to the Bahamas.
When we got about 12 miles offshore, this is about 9:30 at night, I had been watching the airplanes going into Miami. And I was watching this one particular light, and it came over and then it just stopped. And I thought, now this cannot be an airplane, and just stopped in midair. And after it stopped, the swirling mist started spinning underneath it. It was kind of like in a cocoon shape.
It's not a helicopter. It's not a helicopter, man. Oh my God.
And then the swirling mist formed very slowly underneath it. And then the light just descended down into the mist, and it glowed a very odd orange color.
What is that?
I was actually wondering, am I going to make it home from this? Because it was very strange. I said a couple prayers, and but after 2 or 3 minutes, the mist just disappeared, and you could see the stars behind it. It was like it had never been there. Until you've been out there and seen what I've seen, you cannot say that it isn't real, because there's something to the Bermuda Triangle.
Of all the mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle, the disappearance of Flight 19 is the most infamous. On December the 5th, 1945, 5 TBM torpedo bombers set up from Fort Lauderdale in Florida. They were never to be seen again. After they went missing, a rescue aircraft, a PBM Mariner seaplane, was sent up to look for them, and within minutes of taking off, it too disappeared. Over 20 aircrew vanished into thin air that day. It's one of the greatest mysteries of modern times.
Okay, Jeff? See you on the bottom.
Now, Mike Barnett and the Association of Underwater Explorers think that they might have found wreckage of this PBM Mariner. Based on the flight records from the time, he believes that the aircraft exploded in midair about 40 miles off the coast of Florida. People have been searching for the wreckage for 50 years. If they have found part of Flight 19, it would be huge news.
I think we have a pretty good shot at trying to narrow down where this aircraft went down. Our playing field is probably about a 7 square mile area, that box or a circle we're going to be looking in.
Jeffrey, you seen anything?
Just ran over something over here. It's a little pop-up, so we're going to see what it shows.
See how it's kind of coming up and see there's fish over top? Yep, there's wreckage there.
Yeah, that's a good signal right there. That's the best one we have.
Something's definitely there. Don't know what it is yet. We definitely have a wreck down there, but it's a very small target, which could either be partially buried aircraft, a section of an aircraft, or some other piece of debris. Coming on scene, about 5 seconds.
You see the bump on the bottom machine, and you're like, okay, there's something there. Then you roll off the boat. Dead silence. Everything goes completely quiet. You turn and face the anchor line, grab a hold of it, and you watch that wreck come out of the blue. And on day one, I'm kind of a naysayer, I guess. I assumed it was going to be a container or a washing machine or, something like that. Man, when I saw that it was an aircraft, I was like, oh, come on, are you kidding me?
We're all rolling into the water wondering, is this it? I mean, this could be the plane that we're looking for.
It's just sitting there like it had just landed there. There's no wings visible or anything like that, but, seeing a big radial engine and a defined cockpit.
It's almost a picture-perfect airplane sitting on the bottom. It was apparent pretty much immediately from the first time you laid eyes on it that this is definitely an aircraft.
I think anybody at that moment has to wonder what happened to the pilot. Did he go down with the plane? Did he make it out safely? Was he recovered? It's always interesting to answer those questions in some way.
It's very much like a cold case investigation, because this aircraft has been on the bottom for potentially 50, 60 years, and now we've reopened it, trying to look for any kind of evidence on the site that might yield some kind of information.
Now I'm thinking, all these feelings were right. Today is the day for sure. This is the PBM. I know it. We got it nailed.
Coming up, has the crew really solved one of the greatest mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle? Is this the wreck of the PBM Mariner from Flight 19?
Definitely military, definitely World War II era, big radial motor, really exciting stuff, very cool.
And tragedy at sea, as an experienced sailor vanishes into thin air in the middle of the ocean.
The breath left my lungs, and the thought in my mind was, how can I live without my brother?
Mike Barnett and his team from the Association of Underwater Explorers have discovered what they think could be the wreck of the PBM Mariner seaplane from Flight 19 that disappeared off the coast of Florida in 1945. If it is, then it would be one of the great discoveries of all time.
Immediately upon seeing that this was an aircraft, you get the little, oh, hey, we got an aircraft, this is good. But then you have to step back a little bit and go, well, it's a really small site, it's significantly smaller than what we're looking for, so maybe, maybe not.
Despite their initial enthusiasm, the more the team examined this site, the more they realized that this wreck was simply too small to be the PBM Mariner.
It was apparent pretty much immediately from the first time you laid eyes on it that this is definitely an aircraft. As we got to looking at it more, it became obvious pretty quickly that it was not the Mariner just because of its small size, but it was still very interesting because it was from the right era. It was a World War II era aircraft that we were not necessarily expecting to find there. So it's almost like uncovering a second mystery while you're trying to solve the first.
It's just sitting there like it had just landed there. There's no wings visible or anything like that, but, seeing a big radial engine and a defined cockpit, and it had a distinct rake to it that immediately, we all thought Corsair. Underwater, we can kind of talk into our rebreather, and it's like, Corsair, Corsair. So it was pretty cool. We were like, all right, we got a Corsair.
Many Corsair fighters were launched off the coast of Florida in World War II, and dozens were known to have crashed out at sea.
We found the site, the wreck site. We confirmed it was an aircraft. Unfortunately, it wasn't the aircraft we're looking for. It was, unlike the twin-engine Mariner search aircraft we're looking for, this was a single-engine, single-seat fighter aircraft, World War II vintage. It had a very similar, it's the same power plant for the aircraft we're looking for, but unfortunately, it's just not the right aircraft. So we'll have to keep looking.
It might not be the wreckage of the PBM Mariner they're looking for, but it's another tantalizing piece of the puzzle. The remains of a World War II Corsair fighter lying on the ocean bed in the same area that Flight 19 disappeared.
At the end of the first day, I was still feeling optimistic. I've worked several aircraft projects in the past, and I know that a lot of times you have to hit multiple targets before you find what you're looking for. So the fact that we didn't find the Mariner on the very first dive of the project was not a negative indication to me at all. And so I ended the day feeling optimistic and looking forward to day 2.
Hundreds of people have simply vanished into the Bermuda Triangle over the years. One of the most bizarre stories is the disappearance of Jimmy Trindade.
Tonight, a mystery on the high seas. 54-year-old Jim Trindade disappeared on January 12 during a trip from the Bahamas to Florida. No blood was found on his boat, but there are several strange clues left behind.
On January the 12th, 2006, Jimmy Trindade and 2 friends set off from Spanish Cay in the Bahamas en route back to Palm Beach in Florida. Their story is one of the most extraordinary events in the history of the Bermuda Triangle.
Jim had made this trip hundreds of times. To navigate them, he could literally do it by the sun and the clouds. It was just a very simple, easy trip. On this particular day, though, we got a call right about dusk saying that something had happened out on the ocean and Jim was missing. So what do you mean something happened? Well, somehow Jim got separated from the 2 boys. Something happened. They don't know. He disappeared.
According to his friends, Jimmy's more powerful speedboat pulled away from them, and they lost sight of him. Then, an hour or so later, they heard what they thought was Jimmy's voice sending out a mayday call on the radio.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is United States Coast Guard. Requesting no persons on board, over.
Jim, he was a boat captain. He was a man's man. He was a guy who could navigate the waters. Sure, he would know every reef and shoal and buoy. People would look for him to advice on how to navigate through those waters. How could he be missing?
Then early the next morning, dramatic news comes through.
The phone call came at 12:30 at night. It was the Coast Guard, and they had found the boat via satellite image. And then they had sent a Falcon jet, and the Falcon jet took infrared pictures. At that particular point, we had hope. Okay, they found the boat, and now they just need to save them, rescue them, bring them home, and everything would be fine. So we huddled on the couches, the family, and about 6:30 that morning, we get another phone call, and we're expecting it to be the Coast Guard saying, "We got them, we're bringing them home." And instead, it was the Coast Guard, and they told us that they had boarded the boat, and no one was on it. And the second that I heard that no one was on it, when I could hear that voice on the other end of the phone, the breath left my lungs, and the thought in my mind was, how can I live without my brother?
Right now, we're going to go ahead and lower our rescue swimmer.
To add to the mystery, not only was the boat empty with the engines idling when the Coast Guard found it, but the coolers were stuffed with expensive food and champagne.
And the Coast Guard originally said that, well, it was a boating accident. The boat must have hit something and thrown him overboard. But we looked closer, and we saw that the 2 GPS systems, which are guidance systems that track the boat, where it goes and where it's been and how to get where it wants to go, both systems were erased. How do they erase themselves? How does a man, wait a minute, let me erase my GPSs and then I'm going to fall overboard? And it was obvious to us as a family that something terrible had happened out there.
When I heard he wasn't on board after they had found the boat, I couldn't believe it. It was a complete shock.
Fred Greaser was a close friend of Jimmy's and was a huge part of the search effort to find him.
Jim's wife Candace called me to see if I would take the plane and go see if I could find him. And we took off from Stewart. Went straight away to where the boat was, still circling. Coast Guard was on the scene. There was a virtual armada of aircraft. Coast Guard had everything out there. Really, at first, I kind of discounted anything really happened to Jim. Jim was a very able seaman and had made that trip hundreds of times. I just could not figure it out. If he had had a heart attack, if he fell overboard, it was to this day, it's very difficult for me to try and put that together because it just does not compute.
Professor Brian House is an expert on the seas off the Florida coast. He believes that it's possible that Jimmy was caught unexpectedly by a rogue wave.
Rogue waves can have dramatic effects on small boats, particularly because when you take a small boat out, you're not necessarily expecting to get really rough conditions. Then all of a sudden, a large wave, much larger than what's happening, will come up and cause problems with the boat. Rogue waves have been known to damage ships all the way up to freighters and supertankers, have broken out windows on cruise ships that are in 50 feet above the water. So you can imagine what a large rogue wave would do to, say, a small 20-foot fishing vessel or something like that.
Some of them, what happens is that they try to jump into the water and they try to swim to shore because they see it and they see that the boat is floating away. And they underestimate, the current, their physical ability of doing it, and sure, end up perishing.
No trace of Jimmy has ever been found. He simply vanished into thin air in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle. For Patrick, the mystery of what happened to his brother will remain with him forever.
You know, anytime that you're out there on the water in the Bermuda Triangle, that whether it be natural or supernatural, anything is possible. But to date, we can only know what we know, but how can you ever be certain? How can you ever have closure? The ocean and what happens out there is a mystery in and of itself.
On December the 5th, 1945, 5 TBM torpedo bombers and a PBM Mariner seaplane disappeared into the Bermuda Triangle and were never heard from again. It's one of the greatest mysteries of modern times, and now it might be solved. Mike Barnett's dive team have been searching the ocean off the coast of Florida and believe they may know where the wreckage of this PBM Mariner is.
What we know is that this PBM Mariner, from all available information, experienced a mid-air explosion and rained debris down over probably a pretty good area. So we might not be looking for a single intact wreck site. We might be looking for debris spread all over the seafloor.
On the first day of the dive, they thought they'd discovered it, but it turned out to be a small World War II Corsair fighter plane. Now, on day 2, more determined than ever to find some wreckage from Flight 19, they've picked up something interesting on their sonar.
Mike, you there?
Go ahead.
What we're looking at on the bottom right now is pretty small, but it does kind of have that linear fuselage type look. Over. I have a good feeling about this one, and I was believing that this next one was going to be the PBM for sure. I just had kind of this weird vibe that it was going to happen, So.
Yeah, we're going to splash Evan. We're going to splash Evan first, and then I'll follow him, and then I guess he'll swim over to your boat and do it likewise over there. So once we get set up, we'll anchor up with our sterns hopefully close to the ball, then we can go from there.
It's got a good look to it on the bottom machine. It's about 3 or 4 feet of relief, and it's got a good size, maybe 15 or 20 foot long, depending on how we're shooting across it. So it's kind of interesting. I got kind of a good feeling about this one. I don't know why. We dive right down to a very large engine. So as soon as I see that large engine, now I'm thinking, all these feelings were right. Today is the day for sure. This is the PBM. I know it.
As I was swimming around the wreck site, my mind was racing, thinking that we may have found the PBM Mariner. It didn't look like a single fighter aircraft. There just wasn't a lot of wreckage there. It was just bits and pieces, just mostly debris. So this might have very well have just been an engine blown off the wing when the Mariner exploded in midair.
Then I see Heather kind of get this look. So I see she's got some material in her hands, and so I start helping her dig, and we dig out what is obvious to me as parachute cord. Now it's, well, here's a wreck that someone could have lost their life in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got it. Thank you. That was awesome.
What do you see down there?
Well, as soon as we got down there, it's clear that it's a big radial engine. We found what looks like a gauge cluster, and we started digging around a little bit, and the coolest find, I think, is there's a parachute.
Yeah.
Great. Definitely a radial engine. Nice big fat octopus hanging out right there at the bottom.
The octopus was cool too.
And what we're pretty sure is a large piece of parachute down there. I brought a small chunk of it up. It was very exciting to find the initial piece of the parachute that was sticking up out of the sand and then to uncover the rest of it. And that, of course, immediately brings thoughts to mind like, did the pilot eject and not make it? Are we going to suddenly find that we are diving on a definite grave site?
No, it was good. Like the other said, it's a large radial engine. It's propped down in the sand with one blade sticking up. We sort of dug around a little bit and uncovered the other, at least two of the other blades, maybe all three.
The next plan is to go down and do a little excavation, try to expose more of the engine and the prop and other portions of the wreck to see if we can find more evidence and that will help with the identification of this site.
Jeff, you hang your laundry on that load? At the end of the second day, they need to find out if their hunch is correct, and whether they have found one of the most important aircraft wrecks of all time, the PBM Mariner of Flight 19.
The exciting thing about all of this is we've got an aircraft out in the middle of the ocean that maybe nobody knows about. Maybe this is yet another Bermuda Triangle mystery, but we're going to find out for sure what it is one way or the other, and if there's a mystery to solve, we're going to solve it.
Coming up, UFOs above the ocean, and a US Navy ship is buzzed by ghost rockets.
The thought had occurred to me this could be something other than man-made. However, I just never knew. I don't think I'll ever know.
There have been hundreds of reports of UFOs and strange lights over the Bermuda Triangle in recent years. But their connection to the bizarre events and disappearances out at sea has never been explained.
As they're coming over, we see that there are actually two light-colored, almost white-colored cylinders, rockets essentially, flying side by side.
In the late 80s, Kurt Rowlett and Dave Malcolm were working for the US Navy as civilian contractors based at the top-secret Ortec facility in the Bahamas. It became known as the Underwater Area 51.
In those days, you didn't talk about things you saw because you were bound by secrecy not to discuss things on the test range.
On one occasion, sailing from the Bahamas back to Florida, Kurt saw what he describes as ghost rockets pass overhead.
We were on one of the LSTs. It's essentially the flat-bottom landing craft-looking boat. And I think this one was, if I'm going to guess here, 90 to 110 feet long. We're sailing due west, and out of the west, suddenly we spot two lights. As they're coming over, we see that there are actually two light-colored, almost white-colored cylinders, rockets essentially, flying side by side. And we both kind of like, what the heck? We're leaning out the window, checking this out as it goes by. It doesn't really look like an afterburner, but it looks like two really hot lights, coming from these things, and they disappear over the horizon. It was a kind of a rather ordinary looking object that was doing something that seemed to be kind of extraordinary. So I kind of lean towards like UFO. But, I'm always waiting for someone to come along and give me, I'm always willing to listen to, a more rational explanation than that, but that's close enough for me.
People will tell you, I was there in the triangle and I saw this, or I was in the general vicinity and this is what happened to me. It's a story that they experienced, and the human experience is what we are dealing with here. Sometimes the paranormal is more normal than we realize.
But it isn't just UFOs that are reported out at sea. A number of vessels have reported seeing phantom landmasses way out in the middle of the ocean, which appear for a short time on their radar, then disappear. One such incident was witnessed by Kurt Rowlett. While patrolling off the coast of Florida, the ship's radar suddenly showed a large landmass rising out of the middle of the ocean.
I was on the 8 to 12 watch that night, which is well after dark, and I'm at the helm. We've got what appears to be a landmass 3 miles dead ahead, and it pops up on the screen, and I think if I recall correctly, it was up there no longer than maybe 3 to 5 minutes, something like that. It was easily a mile deep of water, so there's no way that there's land ahead, but land pops up on the radar.
According to Rowlett, the landmass remained on the radar for about 3 minutes before disappearing, at which point the ship's compass returned to normal. Both this and the ghost rockets incident were officially reported, but no explanation was ever given for what happened.
What we have is we have a place where mysterious things happen. There is no explanation, really, because the only person that knows is the person that's experienced it or the person that has disappeared, and we haven't heard from them.
Dave Malcolm, also had a bizarre close encounter off the coast of the Bahamas while working on an Ortec torpedo boat.
I was in the back of the boat, about knee-deep in the water, and waiting to get a line on a torpedo to haul it in, when something just slowly came into my view, and it rose up silently.
Like in a triangle, or like?
It was triangular, and again, I have to say, it struck me as so odd being in the middle of the ocean and seeing this. In those days, you didn't talk about things you saw because you were bound by secrecy not to discuss things on the test range. So at the time, I never knew what it was, and to this day, I really still have no idea what it could have been.
The thing about Ortec is that it's so secret that not very many people talk about it. And a lot of the UFOs that we see are in the waters near those islands, near the Bahamas. So I tend to think that something strange is going on there if they have something set up, and not very many people talk about it. You hear always about Area 51, but you never hear about Ortec.
The thought had occurred to me this could be something other than man-made. However, I just never knew, and I don't think I'll ever know.
After months of planning and several days of hard diving, Mike Barnett and his crew from the Association of Underwater Explorers believe they may have discovered debris from what could be one of the most important plane wrecks of all time, the PBM Mariner rescue plane of Flight 19.
With the combination of all the information out there, whether it's on the seafloor or in the archives, we can piece together and get the full story. We can learn the identity of the pilot, know his name, know his aircraft, and know its history. It's possible this pilot could still be alive. Personally, I'm thinking, what happened to this plane? What was its mission? When did it go down? Who was flying it? What happened to the pilot? Is it possible that, there's someone's loved one that they've never known what happened to, and perhaps we can provide some closure to those people?
The dive team are returning to the area where they believe the PBM Mariner crashed over 50 years ago. With them is aircraft crash investigator Craig McBurney. It's his job to identify the debris on the ocean floor and determine if this is wreckage from Flight 19. If it is, it would be one of the greatest finds of recent years.
Sure. Well, the plan is to go down on the line, get down to the engine, take an overall look around the engine, and then look at a couple key features. We'll start with the big parts first to see if we can narrow down the manufacturer of the engine, and then we'll start trying to look at the specific model.
Why don't you go ahead and sit over on that side right there. We're going to splash Evan first so he can get your shot, and then I'll coach you through the roll-in, and then I'll come in right after you.
Okay.
When you actually get down on the wreck, it's like going back in time. Even though there's incrustation and there's deterioration, it still makes you go back into a time when that airplane stopped living as an airplane and started living as an artifact or memorial. The engine appears to have come off the aircraft and fallen onto its nose. So the propeller is laying flat on the floor of the ocean, and the engine is sticking up upside down with the back of the engine on the top.
It's possible, based on the way the wreckage lies, that the plane exploded in midair, or that this particular plane that we're looking at exploded in midair, as we know the Mariner did.
The Mariner aircraft has 4 engines, and each propeller in each engine has 4 propeller blades. By looking at the engine mount and the remaining part of the aircraft, that should give us all clues as to how this engine ended up in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle on the bottom of the floor, sitting on its nose like that.
So based on your firsthand observations today, do you have any conclusions or a new theory of what this engine might be and what the aircraft might be?
It's hard to say right now. We have to do a little more research. I'd like to look at the photographs that we took today and see if we can compare those to the manuals that I brought along and see if there's some way we might be able to narrow it down a little.
He's kind of got a list of potential suspects in his mind, and he seems to be fairly confident that this could be the Mariner.
It could still be the Mariner.
Key West International, this is November 1560 Echo, requesting permission to taxi to runway 7.
Altitude is going up. 30 years after Flight 19 vanished into the Bermuda Triangle, another pilot, Kerry Trantham, reported a terrifying experience in the same skies.
I just left Naples and I was heading towards Marathon, and then all of a sudden it was like a big blanket flew over my airplane and I was in total dark. At first I was in total shock, it's like, what in the heck is going on? And then I just tried to get control of the airplane. I felt like I just totally lost control of the airplane. My radio started buzzing, and my instruments were just going crazy, especially my compasses. I wasn't sure if I was right side up or upside down. I was very scared, to say the least. I didn't want to die.
Miraculously, Carey regained control and was able to land her plane. She had it thoroughly checked out, and bizarrely, there were no mechanical and electrical problems at all.
I did not discuss exactly what happened to me for many years because it was just like a big bad nightmare. And if I hadn't gone out and flown the next day, I would have never flown an airplane again.
Coming up, it's D-Day for the dive team, who learn if they've made history and discovered the PBM Mariner seaplane from Flight 19.
I was stoked, man. I got down on that wreck and it was just, it was awesome.
Since the disappearance of Flight 19 in 1945, many have searched for the wreckage of the 6 planes, but without success. Now, Mike Barnett and his team might be about to solve one of the greatest mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle: the location of the PBM Mariner seaplane.
It's a large radial engine. It's propped down in the sand with one blade sticking up. We sort of dug around a little bit and uncovered the other, at least 2 of the other blades, maybe all 3.
As far as I'm concerned, that's definitely the right era, the right size. Looks pretty dang good. I was stoked, for sure.
Aviation crash investigator Craig McBurney will be able to determine once and for all if they have found the PBM Mariner.
So what, based on your first-hand observations today, what do you have any conclusions or a new theory of what this engine might be, what the aircraft might be?
It's hard to say right now. We have to do a little more research. I'd like to look at the photographs that we took today and see if we can compare those to the manuals that I brought along and see if there's some way we might be able to narrow it down a little bit. It could still be the Mariner.
Working through the night, Craig compares the engine and propeller parts on the ocean floor to those of the PBM Mariner. And after exhaustive research, he has some dramatic news.
I don't believe this engine is from the Martin Mariner aircraft, because the Martin Mariner used several different models of engines, and all the models that it did use were 2 rows of cylinders. This is a 1-row engine with 9 cylinders.
It takes him several weeks, but working with the Naval Archives and the official missing aircrew reports, Craig and his team finally piece together the evidence and identify the actual model of the aircraft. He calls Mike Burnett with his findings.
I'm looking at the footage now, and based on the measurements that we took of the engine, specifically the bore of the cylinders, and also the dimensions we got from the propeller, I talked with Larry and Paul and Jerry, and we're all coming to the same conclusion that this is, in fact, a Wildcat.
The Wildcat was a widely used aircraft in World War II. Many were launched from aircraft carriers, and quite a few crashed into the sea after takeoff. Incredibly, Craig believes that he has also found the pilot.
Once we determined that it was in fact a Wildcat, we then searched for missing Wildcats off the coast that were in the area of the Bermuda Triangle. And as of now, the one that's the closest to it, to that location, would be an aircraft flown by Merle Madair in 1944.
According to the official crash report, the plane lost engine power shortly after taking off and then ditched into the ocean. The pilot, Merle Madair, managed to eject before it hit the sea, and that's where the wreckage of his plane has laid for over 60 years.
From the accident report, we spoke with Merle Madair's widow, Wilma, and she provided some anecdotal stories, again consistent with the damage we saw on the aircraft. So everything is still pointing in the direction that the wreckage does in fact belong to Ensign Madair.
Oh, it's always a human story. Ships have crews, aircrafts have pilots, and a lot of times it's nice to finish telling the story of the individual who started. Sometimes we can provide answers and sometimes we can't, but it's nice when you can.
So, after months of planning and a week of hard diving, the mystery of the plane wreck has been solved. It may not be the PBM Mariner from Flight 19, but it is another plane that was lost in the Bermuda Triangle, which can now be accounted for.
I'm not disappointed that it's not the Mariner. It would be exciting to find the Mariner. The Mariner's out there somewhere, and we can certainly keep looking for it. But to have found a plane that is not in existence anymore is equally exciting to me, and so I think it was a great find.
We know that lots of things disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle, and as unglamorous as it sounds, the only way to know where the PBM Mariner went or where Flight 19 went is to systematically start going to look, and that's kind of what we're doing.
I think that by researching and identifying these wrecks and closing the book on these individual stories, our group is helping to prove that there's nothing supernatural about it. They're all, you know, explainable occurrences.
Think of this, we go out in space all the time with spaceships and all kinds of satellites, but when have we really discovered what's beneath us in the oceans? And I think there are a lot of secrets in the Bermuda Triangle that are yet to be discovered.
Yeah, look at it! Wow! Oh my God! It's so close!
Chris O'Donnell and LL Cool J are up for some undercover action next tonight in new NCIS Los Angeles, but they do get a wee bit of help from Washington, from Abby.